Alright, I've been talking Doom quite a bit recently, so from this point onwards, I won't mention it. Video games nowadays are pretty accommodating. It doesn't really matter if you're really good or really bad, most games let you set the difficulty. This mostly concerns action games, as with platformers and puzzle games, developers would have to create entirely new puzzles and platforming challenges. If they didn't want to do that, their options for changing the difficulty are very limited. I know that platformers like Celeste have hard levels and Crash Bandicoot have time trials, but that's endgame content. When it comes to scaling the difficulty of the base game, this is how things generally seem to work out. With action games, it's a lot easier. You can alter enemy stats, behaviour and spawns while keeping the overall experience the same across all difficulties. Normally with most games, you get an easy, a normal and a hard. And then there's Wolfenstein 2, like Jesus Christ. Easy mode has everything dialed down a bit, enemies are made weaker, that sort of thing. Normal mode is the way the developer intended things to be, the most vanilla experience possible. Hard mode has everything turned up a bit for the more experienced gamers. However, some games include an extra difficulty, one that may not even be available from the start. One that exists to unleash the most extreme irrational anger from those who play it, and one that really needs a consistent naming scheme. Uber, Legendary, Expert, New Game Plus, Impossible, it goes by many names, but behind that odd naming scheme is the devil himself. What is consistent, however, is the lust for anger and resentment. In some instances, it's unlockable. You have to play through the game once in order to gain the right to go to hell. Others let you get in for free. The idea is that this mode is supposed to be unfair. There is already 3 fair modes, and then they made this one for the criminally insane. Enemies have aimbot and a mere flick in the nutsack would be enough to kill you from full health. Though to be fair, those are quite lethal. I've definitely made my point. These modes are brutally hard and definitely unfair. A very good example of a harder than hard mode is... I swear this was an accident. Let's call it a cheat day. The original Doom and Doom 2 have Nightmare mode, which on top of upping enemy damage to insane levels also alter enemy spawns, replacing easy to defeat enemies with harder to defeat enemies. The newer games have Nightmare but without the altered spawns. Instead, they have Ultra Nightmare, which is Nightmare with permadeath. You have 1 life. If you die, you restart the entire game, and the thought of getting hours in and losing horrifies me. Alright, Doom talk over. Alright, now I will introduce the main premise of the video. I've tried to pick a nice variety of games to play in an attempt to beat them on harder than hard mode. That's a lie, I'm not beating these games, no. I will document my experience with each one, reviewing whether the mode is hard enough, and I'll play each mode for 2 hours unless otherwise stated. So for the most part, these are just first impressions. Alright, let's get to it. Starting things off with Halo 2's Legendary mode. I played the original release for the most authentic experience possible, which means the horrors. I picked this mainly because of how infamous it is. I have heard many tales of misery at the hands of this mode, and I only played an hour because I was so damn frustrated and annoyed. The first level of Halo 2 is so repetitive. You go through a million identical looking hangars fighting seemingly endless waves of aliens. You're able to tank about 4 or so hits before you die, so I spent the entire time hugging walls and hiding behind boxes. If I stick my head out to shoot for more than 10 seconds, I die, which leads me onto my sworn enemy. Yeah, the elites can go do one. Similar to the player, the elites have a shield that recharges if no damage is dealt to it after a short time. Couple that with the fact that you can't peek out of cover for more than 10 seconds, makes them practically invincible. You almost never get the opportunity to pop their shields, and look at how many they throw at you! The rest of the enemies were fine enough to deal with. The controls being very Halo didn't really help much either. The awful aiming mode made shooting from cover awkward as hell. One thing I did appreciate is how quickly you respawn. It was near instant. Other than that, there was no fun to be had here. Next up, Dishonored's aptly named Very Hard mode. Dishonored is a stealth game. Unlike the other games in this video, I have never played this before, so I don't have anything to compare to. For example, I'm not sure how much damage enemies do normally. However, at no point in the 2 hours did I think this game was unfair. In some instances I thought the opposite, many thanks to our good old friend, Gun. Like mentioned, Dishonored is a stealth game, and there is a large variety of ways to tackle each encounter, with most of them making a complete mockery of the enemies. You can kill them from afar, stealth kill them one by one, or just avoid them. This means you rarely die when stealthing around, and being as though that's the core of the game and your options are pretty vast when it comes to being stealthy, the difficulty is completely superfluous, unless you get caught. If enemies spot you and regular combat initiates, you're able to take about 2 hits before you die. So you have to be flawless when it comes to combat, which in my opinion is really good. This highly incentivizes you to stay hidden, as if you get caught you will most likely die. If you're incentivized to stay hidden, you'll be encouraged to explore different ways you can sneak around, further giving value to the core of the game. Side note, this game is really damn good. You get this dash ability that makes traversal in this game really fun. You can use it to get out of danger, reach high platforms, or just use it to jump across large gaps. It's easily my favourite thing to use in this game. Also, this game has multiple pathways for you to take, and you have a very nice assortment of weapons. Dishonored lets you tackle each area in a way that fits your playstyle. If you for some reason don't enjoy dashing from ledge to ledge, then you can just use the sewer systems or tunnels. Or just go wild with the pistol. Thank goodness ammo is limited, otherwise this would literally break the game. In fact, this game is so damn good, I'm going to beat the entire thing real quick. This is a rare case where the harder than hard mode is actually beneficial to the game. Doesn't feel unfair, and I have no problem beating the game for the first time on this mode. Next up is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Asleep. I'm sorry, I didn't make it far with this game. I'm sure it's a quality time, but it's not for me. The game has Grand Master mode. The enemies hit really hard and basic stuff. A good portion of this game is platforming, which isn't affected by difficulty, so the only way you'll remember what difficulty is in the combat. And oh boy, do you get reminded. There's this one section in the first level that sticks out the most. There's 4 dudes, and before you can take in your surroundings, you're dead. I would say it's just below Halo for being unfair, but I mean... Last game I'll be looking at is Wolfenstein The New Order's Uber mode. I beat the entire game on this difficulty. Did it suck? No. Then again, it was my 4th playthrough, so I knew exactly what to do. Abuse the leaning system. Leaning in this game is a very well executed mechanic. It's smooth and feels very unrestrictive. The gunplay and weapon variety helped as well. For as hard as it got, it never felt unfair. While we're on that note, it got super hard. Rooms of hit scanners are not exactly what I would call a good time, and the shotgunners. Their ricochet ammo killed me more than anything else. It was a fun time though. It wasn't anything extraordinary, it was a very standard harder mode, which wasn't that hard. Me having played it didn't really help. So let's try the sequel. This game was a permadeath mode, but I'll be playing on the one down from that, ultra hard. Not to be confused with very hard. Speaking of hard, Wolfenstein 1 must have heard the difficulty complaints because Jesus Christ, this game is way harder. You start off with 50 base health, the hardest difficulty in this game is technically a step up from the last, some enemies tank so many damn bullets, and if you spend too long shooting at one enemy, another will come up behind you and kill you. Also, just so you know the game means business, there are 3 super soldiers in the first level. Granted, these super soldiers don't take nearly as much to kill as the previous ones, but equally they kill you a hell of a lot quicker. This game is sort of balanced out with the fact that you are made stronger in this game. The ground pound is added to your kit, and I don't know what they did to the laser gun, but it's on steroids or something. And no, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. The gunplay in Wolfenstein 2 feels a lot smoother and more satisfying than the previous game, but the lack of health does become a massive issue, and the game has some really difficult and frustrating combat encounters. The biggest issue I have with this game is the enemy layout and the overuse of commanders. Commanders are guys that, when alerted, will call in backup, so you are heavily incentivized to kill them. So you stealth kill the commanders and then finish off everything else. Sounds cool. The issue is they overuse these guys way too much. Wolfenstein 1 had you go entire levels without seeing these guys. The encounters were varied. The sequel, not so much. At a certain point it just got monotonous. You approach each encounter the exact same. What sucks the most is that this could easily be avoided. The design of the levels themselves are really good, and this game features a much more varied cast of enemies. But no, they wanted a commander everywhere. Like, why? There are some parts in the game that don't even need a commander that would benefit without it being there, but they just decided to put that anyway. Like, what is wrong with you guys? Overall, the first game was a much better experience on the hardest difficulty. I had a lot more fun with it. Its sequel was still a quality time, don't get me wrong, but slightly lacking in some areas. Both were really hard, and the second game was unfair in places, but nowhere near the level of Halo 2. So, for the overall takeaways, harder than hard modes generally stick to the idea of being unfair challenges for the criminally insane, but there are a few rare cases that actually have the core of the game improved by having the difficulty stupidly high.